Jason Mironchuck, welcome to the Will Spencer podcast.
You got it first try. Thank you, Will. Very happy and excited to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. A couple weeks ago, we connected on X, and I saw that you posted a very interesting thesis that I happen to agree with, that we're in an age of sons who are not necessarily just in rebellion to their fathers, but also to their mothers, the Devouring Mother's Vengeful Sons. And that was an article that you posted on Substack that's linked in the description. And I want to get into that, but we've just had a very brief, fascinating conversation just as we were getting ready for this. And it has me curious to know a little bit more about your background just before we get started.
Sure. Well, I'm from Montreal, Canada, originally. The hat represents. Living in Australia right now, Western Australia. Moved out here about 4 years ago with my Australian wife, and then my she was 1 year old at that point, daughter. General background is I'll talk about, let's say, the spiritual aspect of it. My mother and father divorced when I was quite young, born and raised in the late 70s, mostly raised by my mother's family, which is the Ukrainian Polish aspect of it. That's where the last name comes from. Raised around the church, raised with the church in there, but not, I wouldn't say, we weren't going to church every Sunday. This is fairly typical for I think a lot of let's say first generation Eastern Europeans who came over to Canada. There was a sort of a divide, leaving sort of the old country behind, and my grandfather was definitely part of that kind of mentality. But I, had full belief in God, and read my Bible, and was certainly raised with orthodoxy sort of in the mix. And when my grandfather died when I was 12, I was very unprepared for it, and I've been praying to God and not getting the blessings that I've been praying for. So turned from God when I was about 13 in anger and confusion, and went in that whole atheist, anti-theist, that track. I think, you're nodding. Many people have said the exact same thing. It's a curse of the age. Very much, I was very much a man of my age, of that kind of ilk. And then late 2019, I was working in restaurants as a bar manager at the time. I was hanging up Christmas decorations and fell backwards off the bar and put my hand through a back bar, which almost severed my thumb off. So that was happening. So I was in convalescence of that. And then, of course, the long flu of 2020 happened, and the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff was quite harsh in Quebec. My wife was pregnant. We had to move house. So lots of things were going on.
Yeah.
My daughter was born. In and around that time, I saw the George Floyd protests outside my window in Montreal, and at this point, I started to soften a bit on my stance towards religion, Christianity specifically, but through Jordan Peterson's lectures and a whole bunch of other things, like maybe I can allow this sort of. I'm not religious, but maybe I won't have to have as much anger towards it as I had before. Then I saw the George Floyd nail-ins outside my window, and that's when something just went tink. Like I've said that liberalism is sort of the art of stacking mental contradictions, and I use the image of cartoon where you have all these dirty plates that are stacked up on ends, and they're kind of swaying in the breeze. And it was just that one moment where my secular, skeptical brain went, "This is a religious ceremony. What's happening? This doesn't fit." And on top of everything else, and that's just when the cascade happened. And I'm not a very emotional person. I'm usually defined by being sort of grumpy. I'm more or less, always irritable. But that's kind of my constant.
Sure.
And that's just
we need those. We need those men too.
Yeah. I'm a curmudgeon. I'm a iconoclast. But what I found was that right around that time, I started having breakdowns. Like I was just weeping. I have my newborn daughter in my hands, and the Rainbow Connection come on, and I'm ugly crying, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And I just kind of cried out in October of 2020. I cried out to no one really in particular, but I was like, what do I do? And I had a very clear voice answer me saying, bear witness. And I said, okay. And a week later, I got hit with, let's say, 32 years of shame. And that's
Mm,
how I knew something had happened. Now, I've told that story to church fathers and priests since then, and have had that confirmed that that was the voice of the Holy Spirit or voice of God. And that kind of just started that whole, you're talking about, plates coming down.
mhm,
So you kind of realize at that moment that I'm wrong about everything, like
mhm,
everything. And I needed to rebuild and rescaffold my reality, or as we say from the Orthodox frame, my phronema.
mhm,
So because Orthodoxy was the religion of my grandfather, and because it was something that I was relatively, somewhat familiar with, I started to inquire more into Orthodoxy, and that's kind of led me to this point now where now I'm attending liturgy on the regular. I finally found a church down here that I'm attending, St. Mary's, and yeah, and so hopefully we'll be doing my catechemism whenever my priest decides that it's time for them to do that. But it's I've waited this long. We can wait a bit longer, and yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And then so because of all that happening, um, and restructuring the way I'm looking at not just liberalism and society and all the rest of it, but reality itself. I've been sort of blessed with certain, let's say, providential insights, some intuitions that has led me to this Vengeful Son thesis and a few other things, which is sort of incorporating certain church fathers, Jonathan Pajot, a lot of René Girard. There's a lot of memetics
mhm.
kind of that I use to kind of look at media and goings ons and filter through memetics and then come out with sort of operable theories. So that's where we're at.
Well, I think the liberalism is the stack of dirty plates. I think that people can spot some insight there, and it was the vengeful son uh, meme insight that you had that really resonated with me because that's something I spent a bunch of time in the manosphere, and I saw quite a lot of that. And I think that there was a response that I'd observed building to feminism that went beyond a rational response and started becoming irrational in its anger. And I observed that it was like a turning of the revolutionary wheel. Like we had to
Mm.
borrow the feminist framework, you had the men on top, and then the women had to be on top, and now the men are trying to come back around to be on top again. And the revolutionary wheel keeps turning. And I hadn't heard anyone else spot that before, particularly some of the vitriol and the anger that's associated with that. And so when we connected, I was like, okay, we have to have a conversation about this because I think it's really up right now. So if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear you unpack that thesis a little bit further.
So okay, I'll try to go do this as literally as possible. It's a little bit difficult.
I understand.
Plus I'm fasting, so I got fasting brain. So and I like to talk, so I'll try to reel me back in.
I relate to
Ask
both of
me
those.
questions. Yeah, the struggle is real. Reel me back in. Have me correct anything if you need be.
Sure.
Um, so I'll try to describe the way that I first sort of started to formulate the thought. So I was listening to Pete Quinones' show in the near the end of 2023, and he was talking quite a bit about this spirit of the ages
Yep.
and that kind of concept. Another word we could use for it is like zeitgeist.
Hmm.
So I started thinking about that by listening to his conversations and started thinking, okay, what is the new? I feel like we're coming into a new age. What is this new age? And that kind of got me into that. Thinking of it's very it's resentment times 10, right? It's very
Hmm.
directed resentment, and a lot of it is coming out as that spirit of vengeance, like we want to burn things down. And coming out of a lot of young men, and young, I mean anyone who's not a boomer, let's say. So
Yeah.
60 down. Gen X, my generation, is just as guilty of this as anything else. And maybe we'll get into Elon Musk and a few other people who I think are being models for this. But
Please.
so then I started thinking, okay, well, if that's the incoming spirit, what was the outgoing spirit? Then I thought, well, that's the devouring mother, right? Or as Semigog said on my show, the smothering mother. So that kind of spirit of bring all your children onto me. I will suffer for them. I will protect them. And as she's, in her loving martyrdom kind of love, she's also suffering them.
Yeah.
She's like strangling them or drowning them. So there's that image, and that's, let's say, from the 1960s up until 2020, kind of peaking in COVID and the lockdowns and a lot of those other things.
Yeah.
So what would be the precursor to that would be more of a spirit of a tyrannical father. So thinking at the turn of the 20th century, all the way up until the 1950s or so, 2 world wars, Great Depression. These men either abusive or they're distant, they're shell shocked, either from being in wars or being affected by it. And what links all these, let's say, this sort of inverted family unit together is this sort of spirit of revolution, the revolutionary spirit that really kind of comes through, let's say, the 17th and 18th century, kind of runs ground in the 1850s, and then comes back darker and much more as an assault on Christianity itself, on Christendom, on all the, let's say the divine virtues get inverted. So the tyrannical father is the inversion of the wise father. The devouring mother is the inversion of the divine mother, and the vengeful son is the inversion of the prodigal son. So if we're looking at those inversions, and then we're coupling this into sort of liberalism, well, liberalism, in my way of thinking, is a resentment factory. It relies on two things really: Gnosticism or Hermeticism of some sort, and resentment, and it feeds on resentment. That revolution always needs something to act against. It's inside the name, to liberate oneself from an oppressor, from whatever is oppressing you. It could be an actual, let's say, oppressive boss or individual, or you get into sort of the metaphysic. So then now it's liberating yourselves from history, from tradition, from God.
That's right.
And that's this progression. So now I'm looking at liberalism as Luciferian. So when we break a liberal frame, we're trying to break free of this sort of Luciferian frame of reality, and that this family structure that I'm describing. If we think of the traditional family structure, let's say the good one, the virtuous one, it's a mini trinity. It's held together. It's a little monastery inside the house where the father is the office of the priest. We invert that now, so now we have the Luciferian family, right? This revolution through the office of the father, the mother, and the child. And I think that's where we're in right now.
I love how you backed it all the way out to, you have the revolution of the tyrannical father in a way. And by the way, just real quick, so I saw the same things you did after George Floyd, and that also inspired me to become Christian in September of 2020. I come from a very different background, not a background in Christianity at all. In 2021, I wanted to produce a documentary series about this global rebirth of masculinity. And so I had tracked the same trends that you did, going from the Industrial Revolution, the Enlightenment, and Industrial Revolution. You have this generation of fathers, Great Depression, World War II, shell-shocked, stoic, John Wayne, right? You had this rebellious spirit of the 1960s that rebelled against dad, right? And then that evolved into the various metastases of feminism, right? The tyrannical mother being the firmest expression of it once those women became mothers, if they did, or they became tyrannical mothers in bureaucracies or governments, et cetera. And then you have this wholesale revolt that I think began around 2016 with Trump. In fact, I think his first election was, as Michael Moore, the filmmaker Michael Moore, very rightly said, a brick thrown through the window of the establishment. Michael Moore ended his career with that speech. He gave a speech like in Michigan or something like that, trying to explain, hey, this is how America has disaffected many working class men. This is how they feel. They want to throw the brick through the window of the establishment. I think young men felt the same way. And then what you had, instead of Trump's second election, is you had Joe Biden, right? The Biden scam administration. And I think what that did, first of all, it gave Trump an additional 4 years to plan the game plan that he's running right now. But I think it put a pressure cooker on top of so much that rather than allowing the steam to escape for another 4 years through Trump, it built it up even more as you have Kamala Harris, et cetera. And then we're seeing it explode now. And I think it started exploding particularly after October 7 of Palestine, Israel, and then after the assassination attempt, the Haitian dogs and cats. But I thought that Trump's second election in October, I thought it was all this tension that had built up. And once he got elected, everyone was just going to breathe a sigh of relief, like, right? You're shaking your head. So, and you're right, because it just got so much worse after that. And now it seems to be accelerating. And that's why I think this conversation is urgent. Go ahead.
I think that's the reason why people respond to this thing that I just laid out as a hero suit is that one, that I feel that people respond to it on a sort of a visceral level. Like I say the word Vengeful Son and everyone kind of leans forward. What is that? Because you kind of feel it. The other thing too that I think people contend with, and this is oftentimes back and forth I get with from people who are trying to tell me that I'm wrong. I'm like, well, I don't know how I could be. It's I'm just giving Thesis, yeah, you can come up with your own. That's cool. But I think what people misunderstand is that, well, okay, there's a discernment between justice and vengeance, and where that line is drawn is very, very murky. And when I first started presenting this this concept out to people, I said the problem with the Vengeful Son is it's going to feel good. And because it's going to feel good, people are going to lean into it and they're going to justify it. And they're going to say, no, 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 this is justice. The bad people have to have the bad things done to them. The other thing they people misunderstand is they think the other side is doing it, doing the bad stuff, and they're not. The way that these spirits work is it infects everybody. So the Devouring Mother, though we just came through 60 years of it, the Devouring Mother wasn't just affecting women or just feminists or just liberals or just this group. It affected all of us. Our concept of what a man is, what a father is, what masculinity is, has been completely and totally altered. And it was totally altered by the tyrannical father. Our grandfathers weren't like our great grandfathers, and certainly weren't like our great grandfathers. You can blame it on, if you want to blame on things. Right. It's the industrial era. It's this. It's that. It's World War I.
Go back to the garden.
Sure. Yeah. But either way, things have changed. So when you look at something like Girardian mimetics, what Girard kind of posits is that we all need models. So we don't know what to want. We always look for other people to tell us what we want. Yeah. But you can also apply this to people, how to behave. What is these things? So we look for models. Anyone with a young child knows this. Your child gets to define what man or woman is from her father and from her mother. So at early stages, and then that gets more complex as the child grows up and encounters other people. But essentially, the concept of man, masculine, father, these things get defined by the child's actual father. So when you start writing this large, so these effects aren't just effects on, let's say, the political or just a social kind of disease. It's changing people's perception of what a man, a woman, father, mother, masculine, feminine, these things have all been part of this revolution. They've become inverted. So when we look for, I've seen this a lot in sort of the dissonant spheres. You see a lot of young men going back to they're exalting, let's say, the great generation, or if they go, well, there's problems there, they'll go back to the 19th century or even further back. You're like, you have no relationship to these people.
The Roman Empire.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, great, cool, awesome. But you have no relationship to these people. Like, how are you going to be Crassius? Because you read a book? It's literally what Girard talks about when he examines Don Quixote. And Don Quixote is trying to model romantic knight characters in these romantic knight novels of the time. And he's gone crazy because of it. He's trying to be the ultra chivalrous knight at age 90, right? So it's like, it's the same phenomena where these people are trying to act out characters, but they have no direct modeling. So when we talk about the Prodigal Son, we can maybe get there a little bit, but the the thing that I think that Westerners have got to get uh, through their heads, and maybe this is why people are coming back to the church in such numbers, and it's pretty massive numbers now,
Yeah.
comparatively the last few years, anyways.
18 to
Um,
24, some numbers just came out today that one third of 18 to 24-year-old males have gone back to church, something like that.
and Peter Thiel is directing a whole bunch of people from Silicon Valley to get back into
Yep.
church, and lots of these things happening. We can talk about Peter Thiel too, because I think he's very central to all of these things.
I
But
absolutely agree.
in the story of the prodigal son, it's the youngest son who leaves his father's house in his vainglory and pride to strike out on his own, meets ruin, it finds himself in the employ of a cruel man, and he's eating the food of the pigs, and he decides to return to his father's home because at least his father treats his workers better, and he meets
Hmm.
his father on the road, and he's ashamed, but the father embraces him and brings him back with a hero's welcome. Here's, the prodigal son has returned to become the prudent son. And
Mhm.
in that story, of course, we can attach that to the church. That many of us have left the church in our vainglory and our pride, have realized that our lives are meaningless without it, have returned, and that's why I say it's about returning. So we return, we repent, and we redeem, or we become
Mhm.
redeemed. We are in the act of redemption, and these things are carried forward in the Jesus prayer, for example, like, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Return, repent, redeem. Return, repent, redeem. Return, repent, redeem. This is the way I
Mhm.
think we break this resentment cycle. We break this revolution, right? We return to model the perfect model, which is Christ.
Mhm.
And we don't have to
Amen.
have a one-to-one relationship with him in that sense. Like, it doesn't have to be our literal father, but all the information is held within Christ of how to be a good man, a good father, a good Christian, a good citizen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the cure for a lot of this stuff.
And I think you're right. I think the thing that troubles me is to find that um, men are coming home as prodigal sons, but rather than returning to a righteous father who asks repentance of them, you have a lot of men that are being exploited. And the thing that they feel that they need to repent of is their liberalism, as
Mhm.
opposed to repent of their bitterness and their rebellion. And that's the part that I'm seeing, and that troubles me, particularly, coming from the manosphere and the red pill and 4chan, these forces of cultivated bitterness that live in the various levels of the underworld of the internet, that are really ginning up this resentment in men, and that has now flooded into the church in various ways. And because they've discovered the way the manosphere works, not a lot of people saw this, in part because the manosphere is basically now gone, is it functioned via cults of personality. The cults of personalities, you have a man, a figure, who has identified a pain point for some collection, large or small, of young men. And he knows exactly how to push on the pain point, and he pushes it, and the men go, ow. It's like, I'll sell you this medicine for the pain point. I'm the only guy who's got the medicine, right? And so you have this bond that develops, and then there are rings. There's the guys that are closest to the leader, and the guys outside, and the bullying flows outwards, right? So everyone wants to get up a level up the hierarchy so they can bully outwards to the guy at the
Right.
top. And that is a very profitable business model, as it turns out, until the peccadillos and sins and low character of the men are revealed, which is what happened to the manosphere. And Andrew Tate has taken that business model, and he's now turned it into a global empire. And certainly we can talk about him as well. And so, all that being what it is, I'm seeing some of that replicated in the Christian space, and that saddens me. I think sad is probably the best word for it. I mean, it's outrageous, as in it's an outrage, but it's also one of those things that God will judge pretty
Mhm.
harshly, I imagine. But in the meantime, until that day comes, until he strikes from the heavens, there is the unresolved question of what to do with young men's anger, right? And not to shut it down, not to shame it away, but how to, okay, you get to let it out, but then you have to stop it. You see that? You have to let that go, bro. And that
Mhm.
instinct is not there in the dialogue yet.
Forgiveness is a tough one, right? Um, I, I say these things about the vengeful son, about, and I've said to other people as well, is that I'm aware of the danger of it because I feel it too, right?
Sure.
There's that call in me too, where you bring up certain names, and I won't because you're on YouTube, but we've all had dark little fantasies about certain people.
Whisper,
You know,
whisper. I won't tell anybody.
oh, just a certain doctor, perhaps, who
I think I know who you mean.
gloriously retired. But and there'll be other ones too. Look, we're seeing this happen in the left wing, anyways, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing this happen. The Luigi Mangiones, the cults of the Gigians, the general transformed kids are something that I'm raising some alarm bells off, because I think that's the army of the Vengeful Son. So conservatively, what we know now, that within the continental United States, the last figures I saw were around 100,000 or more kids have been given puberty blockers. Okay.
You said 100,000 kids have been given puberty blockers.
That we know of. And if we expand that to the rest of the West, we're talking at least 500,000 kids. Okay. That's just puberty blockers. We're not talking the operations.
Oh, okay.
So
the operations would be an additional or a subset of that?
Well, we'd be let's say there'd be probably a Venn diagram, like, you know, everyone who's had a surgery is also taking these medications.
Right.
But as we're finding out, these puberty blockers, they're permanently disabling people.
Yeah.
So regardless of how much surgery you've had, you're going to be altered for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so the easy one to look at is, let's say, the 35-year-old guy with a beard wearing a sundress, right? That's an easy target for our condemnation, and maybe rightfully so. What we're not talking about is the 13-year-old kids who've been given these puberty blockers. What happens with them in 3, 4, 5 years' time when they're 18, 19, 20? They come out of this fog. They no longer have this externalized pressure, and they realize they've been lied to.
Yeah.
Because one of the things about the Vengeful Son that I have in my article, it's a respond to betrayal. This awareness of betrayal, the original red pill that Curtis Yarvin lays out, is you take the red pill and you become aware that everything around you has been lied. You're living this lie, that the post-Nuremberg regime, a lot of these narratives, some are based in fact, a lot of them are lies. And you've been living this lie, and you finally, all the lies are coming home, and they're being revealed. We're in this apocalypse where all things hidden are being revealed.
Yeah.
And people who've been on this for the last 5-10 years, well, we've had the benefit in some ways of not being able to say much. You say too much and you get canceled, right? So you have to like play these little games and you kind of go through your periods of anger and resentment and all these things, but you kind of work through it over the last 5-10 years. And now, I can't speak for everyone, but I'll speak for myself. I'm kind of in a good place now, right? Where I look at these things like, well, that's unfortunate, but I've gotten angry about it before. That didn't fix anything. Moving on, right? What's going to happen to a lot of people, I think, is they're going to get on board with all this awareness of a lie all in one shot. They're not going to get that 5-10 years of, acceptance. They're going to get it right away, and then once they get it, they're going to get real angry real fast, and they're going to speed run through that period of awareness in 6 months, a year. It's coming fast now. So when that starts happening, and you have all these kids, 500,000 at least, right, who've been lied to, deceived, altered, and they wake up to this lie, and we're starting to see this, what happens then? And I think that's your army of vengeful sons. Because that's a bunch of kids, and I've said this before, the nature's WMD is 18 to 25-year-old young men.
Yes, it is.
If you give them a gun or a weapon and you give them a target, they'll go do that. And we're starting to see it. Gigians are just the tip of the iceberg. Because they're going to be angry and they're going to lash out, and they're not going to care. If they can't get to the person who lied to them, they'll get the next best thing. Luigi, if we go by his story, had bad back surgery, right? Living in pain. So who's his target? Who's his scapegoat? Pharmaceutical CEO. Sorry, insurance CEO.
Mm-hmm. What's so interesting about this, I remember after the 2020 election, it was pretty clear that that was not a straight up legit election. That was pretty clear at the time. And I remember there were lots of boards. The Reddit board, the Donald, was still operational at the time. I think I'm pretty sure it was, right. And for those who don't know what the Donald was, it was just a message board on Reddit that was 100%, we'll say, dissident right politics. It was heavily 4chan informed, but it wasn't entirely. It was kind of drew a lot of its spiritual energy from 4chan poll and B, but it had a character all of its own. And everything that was percolating on that board, they had anointed Donald Trump. This is 2019 Donald Trump, 2018 Donald Trump. This was during the QAnon days. They had anointed him the God Emperor. Right. I don't think he's the God Emperor anymore, by the way. But they had anointed him the God. I'm so happy you know about this stuff, by the way.
Oh, I think he's transcended the God Emperor. I think he's almost become divinated in some circles. I'm not.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I think he's. Yeah, I think he's. I think you might be right about that. Well, we'll unpack that in a second because I want to chase this thought down before it runs away.
Yeah.
So they had anointed him the God Emperor, and it seemed pretty clear to me that, like, well, is this election going to be allowed to stand? And or is everyone wants to be called the God Emperor until it comes time to do God Emperor stuff, right? To stand up and say, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, 4 years of hindsight, I'm glad things went down the way they did. I'm not trying to revise history, and I think it was the wisest choice for him to step back. But I remember at the time, again, this was when all the QAnon stuff was going on, there was a lot of conversation about dropping the Epstein client list or something. We'll never see that. But at the time, it's like, maybe what he'll do, again, this is all QAnon stuff, they're going to dump all of the list of all the crazy pedophile sex traffickers into the public and bring it all down. That seemed to be one of the possible outcomes. And I remember there was a lot of tension in the air, like what's actually going to happen. I've never been a hardcore prepper, but during those weeks between, I think I would probably say early December up until the inauguration, I stocked up and I've got big water jugs and food. And I was like, well, I'm going to, get ready to stay inside my place for several months if I need to and ride this out. Right. So hindsight, it's all very silly, but it all felt very real at the moment, especially because I'd been back in the United States for less than a year at that point, COVID and George Floyd. But then I was thinking about it and I was like, well, if they were to actually do that, let's say that they were to actually drop and this is in the days before AI, it was still rumored to exist, but it was still deep fakes were kind of a thing. I think they weren't all that believable, not like they are now. But let's just say that you could drop hardcore, irrefutable evidence of someone significant in a position of power, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, name it, engaging in a horrific, deplorable, evil act. Like, what would happen? If you were to actually do that, what would you see? I mean, you would see probably a lot of things. You'd see a lot of the outrage you're describing. You'd see panic. You'd see people's worldviews just crumbling before them, because I think we're not ready to deal with the level of lies that we truly live in. Society is a nice paint job over a veneer of very many lies that I'm sure, Lord willing, one day when we're all in glory, we'll get to see them and be like, praise God for his son, Jesus Christ, to deliver us from all that. But until then, I think we don't get to actually see them. And I imagine there are people inside the CIA, the Defense Department, who knows, that have seen much of that stuff, and who knows how they sleep at night. But your thesis is very interesting because I've watched the rise of conspiracy culture in the public. You see, Alex Jones has now been elevated to a position of prominence. You see Joe Rogan, right, elevated to a position of basically the world's top journalist. I don't know, right? You see Ian Carroll. You see so much of this is now, conspiracy culture is mainstream culture now, and that's just what it is. And so your statement has me wondering, are we going to see something like that, some revelation that galvanizes all of these young men in rage towards an intended target? And I think that seems somewhat likely. I mean, I can't say how likely, but the stage is certainly set for that because everyone's talking about what's going to be the next big psyop. Is it going to be aliens? Is it going to be, COVID-2 or whatever? But the stage is very much set for the revelation of some possibly true, truth mixed with lies statement that galvanizes the energy of generations of young men, again, the ones that you said, and points them in a direction and unleashes them. That, I think, is that's a very real observation, sir.
The thing to keep in mind is the adversary doesn't care how
That's
he
right.
gets you. The
That's right.
battleground, the spiritual warfare we're engaged in is the battleground is your soul,
That's right.
and the adversary doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're right wing or left wing. Doesn't care how you vote. Doesn't care what denomination you are. Doesn't care. If he can get you, he can get you. And the temptation, again, with his vengeance is how it's going to get coded, because everything is a set of reactions. So to go back to Girard, he often uses in his work with the scapegoat, and how Christ essentially breaks the scapegoat mechanism. So in the classic sense of scapegoating and the sort of mythological structures, the idea would be things are gone wrong, right? Rivalry has risen in a community, and now we're approaching all against all violence, so brother against brother. And in order to dissipate this violence, a individual or a group will be chosen and flagged out, and all the sins and all the problems of this society will be placed on them. And so when they are sacrificed or expelled, things get better, because really what you're doing is just reducing the mimetic tension in the society. So let's say we'll take a classic one like Oedipus Rex, right? In the classic mythological structure, well, Oedipus is guilty of all the things he did, right? Of it, he did had relationship with his mother and murdered his father, and this created this horrible situation that once he was expelled, suddenly things got better. That's the classical mythological structure. Girard believes that in sort of anthropology, that these stories are actually based on some truth, like some guy was made a scapegoat, sacrificed in whatever way, things got better, and because of that, he becomes deified, and a story is built up around that person, because then all of a sudden he's the person who saves society. The introduction of Christ, however, breaks myth, because Christ is a perfect victim. Christ is innocent. That is unlike any others. For those people who like to say that Christ is a story, it's like, okay, even if you want to reduce it to that, it's unlike any other story ever told before. And that's where it draws its power, that it converted people by the story, by the word, because even pagans who had never encountered the story before, when they were presented with it, converted, because that story structure is unlike anything that they had ever encountered. A perfect victim changes everything. And the fact that in Christian societies, all your laws, your rights, all your principles, all your virtues are all based in that sacrifice. So the scapegoat mechanism is broken, because we no longer get the catharsis, and so we can scapegoat. We still use it, vaccinated, unvaccinated. We can Trump, MAGA people, non-MAGA people, et cetera, et cetera. But there's any kind of catharsis that people feel is very temporary. It burns itself out, because we're haunted by the cross. And I've started saying this more openly now. I believe that Christianity has reached a certain level of epigenetics, that it's actually in our say spiritual DNA within the people, so that, like, no matter how much you try to separate us from it, you can't. And I think a lot of attempts have been made to break us or make us abandon our responsibilities as image bearer, because that's the one thing that we have that no one else or nothing else in creation does.
That's
and
right.
it's meant to break us from that image bearer. So we get into transhumanism and a whole bunch of other conversations. But
Darwinian
to me,
evolution.
yeah, well, and it worked for a bit, and
Yeah.
it's not working anymore, because people can do the napkin math with a little help of grok and go, hey, whoa, as you were saying before. It's like, Kirk Cameron used to use the eyeball analogy. It's a standard apologetic, but now I think a lot more people are being brought to it, going, wait, hang a second. So you're telling me that a single cell organism somehow developed eyeballs as complex as ours and did it over billions of years, and it's remained consistent across multiple species, and it always works? And like, no, 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 no. I,
So,
I, I'm no genius here, but these numbers aren't adding up, and it's falling apart. Yeah.
well, I make the same joke about the sexes. So you're telling me two totally independent creatures evolved in parallel to be compatible and to be able to reproduce, and that just kind of happened by chance, right? It just kind of happened. One went one way and the other went the other way, and they just happened to be in alignment. Like I don't think that adds up. But again, now that we've come out from underneath the pressure of the devouring mother, right, to bring it back to the thesis, because I think that exerted such a strong pressure over everything. And I really, in a very real sense, do believe the 2024 election, and I said this on a podcast recently, was about, the masculine patriarchy, because for everything else Donald Trump is, he is very much a patriarch. He has the Trump family name, the Trump family legacy. He's got, I don't know how many grandkids does he have, right? Billionaire, right? Multiple kids, yes, and multiple wives, but yes, he has still built the Trump family name. And versus Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris is a childless woman. She's never born a child, right? And I used to live in San Francisco. She's consistently failed upwards. She didn't even earn her own Democratic Party nomination. A man earned it, and then he checked out and handed it to her, right, as the signature. And so the choice was really about, who are we going to go with? This end product, the degenerate end product of feminism, or a reinstantiation of patriarchy. And the American people overwhelmingly chose patriarchy. And the sigh of relief that I thought was going to happen instead galvanized this spirit of the vengeful son that's now out to take a scalp. I don't necessarily think that that's an improvement either.
No, well, we're seeing Satan chasing out Satan. So one of the points I was making about Gerard is that this idea of throwing stones, right? So the first stone is the hardest, because there's no model for it. But once the first stone's thrown, the second stone gets easier, and the third stone gets easier, and so on and so on and so on. And that's, I think, where we're watching is we're starting to see stones get thrown from certain groups on the left. We'll call them on the left. It doesn't. I don't know what Luigi's thing is, but we're starting to see the attacks on Tesla, all these kind of things, right?
Right.
Now, some of these are undeniably organized, but something's going to be organic as well. And the more that happens, the more you're going to see of it. The thing that will also happen, of course, is our reactions. So if you don't want a police state or a panopticon, or if you don't want to see digital IDs and all these other things come to pass, or let's say, I think they're going to come to pass no matter what, because the conversation's gone past that, and it's been past that for a long time. But if you want to see them applied in, let's say, more judicious ways and less across the board tyrannical, then what you don't want to do is give into that reaction, because all their actions beget certain reactions. Like, just think of the Tesla thing. So you have these people who are terrorizing Tesla's cars. Like, you're essentially making the world's richest man, whose buddy is Donald Trump, who's sitting in the White House and has access to all this information and all this data. Plus, the Tesla cars have cameras on them. This is what you're doing. That's pretty stupid. But there they go, right? And I think it's begging the reaction. And this is where we get into that discernment between justice and vengeance. And I believe that Elon Musk, for example, and I've been developing this concept since 2023, and what I started seeing with Elon, when he was on stage there, and he told Bob Iger to go F himself, and saying you're going to threaten me with money. That, to me, that's Vengeful Son. So part of my analysis in this is that this age we're entering into is an age of total violence. So when we think of violence, we often think of kinetic, right? Physical violence. What I'm starting to see is that this violence will not just be kinetic. It'll be in all forms. The violence itself will be violence of tearing it down, burning it, if we have to. Like if we can't save it, we can't restructure it, tear it down. I started seeing this with game stonks, the game stonk thing, or the GameStop
Mm-hmm.
hedge funds that happened in
Yep.
2021. And I can't find I keep kind of trying to find the quote, but it stuck with me. They were asking at the time one of the guys who were one of the heads of the GameStop holders. They said to him something along the lines of, if you keep holding these stocks, you're going to lose all your money. And his response was, I don't care. It's not about making money. It's about hurting the hedge funds, because those are the guys who hurt my dad in 2008. I was like, what is that? And I followed that away and like, interesting box. And that keeps coming back up. We just saw all the free fall in the stock market recently, and what a lot of responses, a lot of people online, especially from Gen Z people, just laughter. People
That's right.
crying about their 401ks and very worried about their investments, and a lot of people just started laughing.
Yeah, pull yourself up there, bootstraps, Grandpa. Learn to code.
Right. And to me, that's just violence. That's violence of a kind.
Yeah.
And it's once you start applying that, so kids online don't have to go punch someone. They can ruin your life from a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
Or wage economic war, wage meme wars, and do now with AI, who knows what they can do with that. And so we're entering this age again where we no longer have the breaks in society. We no longer have the proper discernment between what is justice and what is vengeance. Those two things are going to get intermixed. Both sides, everyone is going to start saying that no, my vengeance is justice and their justice is vengeance, and then we get that all against all kind of situation. So we'll see how that plays out. Well, the interesting note, of course, is Peter Thiel, who was René Girard's top student, and so he knows mnemonics inside out. Yeah.
What?
Top student. Read Luke Burgess's book Wanting. It starts off with an interview with Peter Thiel. So
we'll pull that up real quick.
Yeah, Luke Burgess. He'd be someone you should have a chat with.
All
and he. So I've been following Peter Thiel with a bunch of interest, which led me looking into PayPal Mafia, and I told my friend Matt Erickson over at Kingpilled about that. He did a whole bunch of research, and that started off again around 2023, and he's built out this whole heuristic, which has led us down many different avenues of looking into things. But essentially, it's this: is that you have Peter Thiel, who is the behind the scenes guy. Let's say Elon Musk is the forward facing. A lot of kids are modeling Elon Musk. All the VC guys are all modeling Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel, homosexual, sure, but also a Christian. I'm not quite sure his denomination. I know he's. I think he's.
Together.
Yeah, well,
not a thing.
Yes and no, because look, Father Seraphim Rose, one of my. He's Blessed Seraphim Rose. I believe he'll be made into a saint fairly soon. He was a hero monk in the Orthodox Church. He was a repentant homosexual,
sure,
who wrote some of the greatest modern Orthodox books, and has been a guiding light to many who are finding their way to Orthodoxy, especially in the West. So,
it's Nihilism. Nihilism is a fantastic book. The key is a repentant homosexual, but we can. So we can avoid that rabbit hole, but I continue with Peter Thiel.
So you have Peter Thiel over here, who's again repentant, unrepentant homosexual. We'll leave that to him and his priest. I know he is certainly Christian. I'm not quite sure what his denomination was, or will be. Interesting thing about Peter Thiel, however, as well, is that he was the clerk for Anton Scalia. And he had a very, very close relationship with Anton Scalia.
He's done everything.
Yeah. Well, Anton Scalia passed away under dubious circumstances.
Wet Works at the Ranch. Do you know that reference?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Anton Scalia was he's sort of an order of Catholic. He's a very, very devout Catholic. So you have René Girard. Peter Thiel is his top student. In fact, René Girard only was a PhD mentor for one student, and that was Peter Thiel. René Girard, Roman Catholic. Anton Scalia, also high up in the Catholic orders, mentored Peter Thiel, and from what I understand, very father-son relationship. Peter Thiel now has done mentorship with J.D. Vance, Matt Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg, to the point where there are emails out there where Peter Thiel was talking to Mark Zuckerberg, saying that Mark Zuckerberg is going to be Mr. Millennial. He's going to be the millennial model. And this is before.
Is he really?
This is before Mark went away and came back out with longer hair and wearing the surfboard and drinking the Coors Light.
Really?
People are being maneuvered. So in Girardian memetics, Girard points out two things, right? You can be a model. There are models, so people who model behavior, and people want to be like them. So they do everything like them, they dress like them, they whatever, right? There's also moderators or mediators. Girard uses the example of Iago in Othello. So Iago is not modeling Othello, or Othello is not modeling Iago, but Iago is directing him to what he should want. You should desire this, and you should desire that, and this is who you should model, and isn't that interesting over here, and stuff like that. Peter Thiel, of course, is involved with Palantir. One of the Rumble is basically one of his cutouts. Palantir is now being onboarded throughout the entire U.S. government through Grok, because Grok is now part of, so get ready for it.
This explains a lot, that Peter Thiel would be the moderator, right? And he's setting Elon Musk up as the model, and Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance. I think the three of them together. The only reason why maybe Trump has ascended from God Emperor. I think he's kind of just stepped away, and he allows Vance and Musk up front to draw the fire, and he just is off doing his art of the deal thing, which I think he probably is enjoying doing more than being the outspoken figurehead that he was from 2016 to 2020. So I can see.
Just look at J.D. Vance and Mark Zuckerberg. Two different people, very different, right? One Republican, right wing, one liberal, left wing, but they're both millennials.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance, Catholic, intermarriage with an Indian woman, but whatever. I don't like to involve people's families. But just from the J.D. Vance model, there's going to be a lot of people modeling J.D. Vance.
Yes.
The memes, all these memes out there. That's not an accident.
No.
None of this is by accident. Mark Zuckerberg has gone away a little bit. I think you're going to see a lot of Mark very soon, and he's going to be the new model for left-wing millennials and left-wing Zoomers.
I think you're right. Left-wing, particularly. I think you're right about that.
Liberal, whatever. Yeah.
Liberal. Yeah. This is so interesting, because I can see, and I can, more importantly, feel all of this. I haven't read Girard, but that seems like something that I need to fix. I've certainly heard a lot about him, and I've picked up environmentally a lot of his ideas, and I feel this moving through X. And what's so interesting about X is you said earlier that I forget how you phrased it, but it used to be that when you approach certain subjects of discussion in social media, you would get shut down, lose your account, get banned, or whatever. That has changed. And maybe there was a moment of exuberance where X had become kind of the Wild West in a good way. But now what it's become is, rather than being censored, the narrative is driven. So the narrative used to be constrained to a very narrow range. Now it's completely wide open, for better and for worse, much for worse. But instead, you have armies of accounts. Who knows if they're real? Who knows if they're feds? Who knows if they're paid, who knows it, whatever they are. The narrative is driven in particular ways, and the explosion of the Vance memes was like, yeah, it was fun. A lot of those were pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, the girl, the famous girl on the cover of National Geographic, the Pakistani girl with the red head covering that famous National Geographic photo
Oh
where
yeah,
she's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
that one, that was probably my favorite, just for all the different reasons. But I think the first time that I spotted something like that I thought was weird was, I think it would have been about 2 years ago. A meme went absolutely wild through X and Instagram, probably for YouTube too, where it was, how often does your man think about the Roman Empire? Do you
yeah. Oh
remember
yeah,
that?
yeah.
And I was like, I never think about the Roman Empire. Right? Like, if you just, how often, like, but there were, and look, maybe it started out as, as a harmless prank for men to play on their wives and girlfriends, because the whole joke was that women couldn't imagine that men were thinking about the Roman Empire that often. It's like, yeah, I think about it all the time. And they're like, what are you thinking about? Right?
I
But
think about it all the time.
do you actually think about it all the time?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I never think
Oh, I
about the
mean,
Roman Empire.
I'm also an observant Orthodox Christian, so
Oh,
Byzantium is often kind of a topic of conversation that kind of gets brought up as soon as
okay.
somewhere down the line, right?
That makes sense.
But yeah, no, I think a lot of men, especially I think right wing dissident men, think about the Roman Empire often.
Really?
Um, yeah, yeah.
So I've been around
So
those guys, and we didn't talk about it often, but I don't know, maybe it's me.
one of my guests on that have come on quite often now, especially from some of my live shows, is my friend Charles Badil, and he made an amazing observation. He said that men are romantics who are posing as pragmatics, and women
Sure.
are pragmatics posing as romantics. Basically, saying that the masculine spirit is actually
Yeah.
much more romantic, and the
Yeah.
feminine spirit is much more pragmatic. And when you hear that, and yeah, right, you see, as soon as you hear that, you go, it's pretty spot on, right?
Yeah.
And uh, so, so when you examine these things, it's that the feminine spirit is actually, we start to see this actually. It's sort of over the last 60 years, we're starting to see this in even in architecture. So we've gone from making banks beautiful places and all these old libraries, which were gorgeous and
Yeah.
exterior and interior, just beautiful things, into gray slabs. A good example is
Yeah.
McDonald's, right? Something that you
Mhm.
can track. It's novel, right? From the 80s McDonald's to the current McDonald's, where you go in and there was playpens and there was, McDonald's had a distinct vibe, had a
Yeah.
distinct look, and you knew where you were. And now it's just a gray slab that you
Mhm.
walk in, there's terminals. Now, here's the thing is that that's actually far more pragmatic. It's cheaper to make, it's uniform no matter where you're at. It's created its own identity within itself, but it's McDonald's, Starbucks, whatever, it's all the same thing. There's a pragmatism to that, but there's no romanticism in it. And I
Mhm.
think once you lean too far into that, you begin to denature meaning out of society. So I've come up with this concept of civilizational capital, and it's based on this idea that human beings need something to invest in, and they'll invest in it for free as long as that civilization mirrors them. So the reason why we build beautiful things in civilization is not because it's rational. It's certainly not pragmatic. It's actually irrational. It creates a new super rationality where because the civilization is exalted, we feel exalted by living in it. So
Mhm.
we feel we give the civilization meaning, and the meaning and the civilization gives us meaning, and we
Mhm.
kind of vibe off that. It becomes that paradox. The other thing that that kind of is attached to this, just to bring it back to modeling for a second, is another. I'm doing all my greatest hits here, kids.
Let's go.
So a throwaway prediction that I made, I called it Jason's apple pie prediction, but now I've made it the Neo-Trads prediction, which is that we're starting to see this now happen rapidly. That once the woke is put away or becomes something of a derision, we're going to see a normalization process happen, and the next thing that's going to happen, the next thing that'll come out of it, is this Neo-Trads. Sort of a neo-traditional cultural movement
Yeah.
that's going to envelop both the left and the right, because it's not going to get rid of a lot of woke primary principles, we want to call it that. It's just going to give them a new facade. So you're going to see homosexuals will still be around. Gay pride will be much more reduced if it's still around. Be much more like Will and Grace, like sensible, gays in gay men in sweater vests, still buying children, but more like Dave Rubin, more like Peter
Right.
Thiel. The
Yeah.
other thing I predicted was that, and this is sort of a reverse prediction, is that you'll start seeing a lot of these OnlyFans women start to, start wearing sundresses or sensible frocks and making apple pies.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I saw that is that somewhere back in, again, 2023, I started looking at all these cooking shows that started popping up, and these women in sort of traditional garb, sometimes with headscarves, making traditional apple pies, and they were getting millions and millions of views on TikTok and Instagram. And some of the comments were the standard, like how this is anti-feminist and stuff like that. But most of it was like, yum, apple pie. And there's no resistance to it. So you take that mimetic thing where now that's being modeled and people are going to want that. And we're just starting to see Nyla Ray, was the number one OnlyFans girl for a very long time, is now the cooking show making apple pies. So, and this is being coordinated. This isn't, some of it's organic, some of it's a flipping of natural desires, but I think a lot of it is being triangulated and presented as a new sort of landing pad for culturally for the center, and you're going to get this sort of mushy Christianity coming out of it,
Yeah.
which is gets us into this interesting time of conversations where I think we can almost put aside the debates with secular humanism. They're still going to happen, but the secular humanists and that whole nominalist school, that's almost done now. It's being put up on trial, but its days are numbered. The next thing we're going to have to contend with is charlatans within the church, and kind of something that you said before, and that's the worrying trend, because that's where a lot of people are going to get in there, a lot of Christian influencers, and we're starting to see this crop up, where they're just, I call them they venerate Bob Christ. I don't know who this Christ is they keep talking about. He sounds like a swell guy, but but I'm not quite sure it's where they're getting a lot of this stuff from, and you're going to see a lot of day one Christians who get sucked into a lot of this stuff, who are going to start tisking people. And look, you and I both have our history. I don't like to throw stones because I'm maybe day two, so who am I? But at the same time, I still see that present danger that if you get your theology wrong, or if you're getting off on the wrong foot and getting sucked into, I think a lot of people desire transcendence. They desire true. They desire to repent. They desire all those things that the Christian church offers, but they'll settle on forgiveness because they don't really actually want to do the hard things. They don't really want to repent. They just want to confess, and so they'll take the surface level of things and not do the harder, deeper things, which realizing that this is a daily, an hourly, a continuous thing. You don't just, get dunked in the water and you're good. Like there's still work to be done. So, yeah. But I think we're starting to see that now. I made that prediction a while back, and I don't go through a day or a week without people bringing it up to me and going, see, I'm like, yeah, I know.
It's, I mean, that's the whole thing that I've been saying about Russell Brand. It's like, hey, look, praise God, happy for the guy, right? I think he believes he's sincere. I think he really does. I don't think that he's lying. I think that there have been other liars out there. Like I wasn't paying attention to the whole Kanye West thing. People got very worked up about that. That did not end up in a good place.
That's a different conversation altogether.
Exactly right. So, but I've looked at Russell Brand, and I've said this continually. Like, look, the real risk of him is that he'll come in and despite himself, again, the man's a multimillionaire. He can pick up the phone and call anybody. So it's not as if, and he can just shut it all down. And he can be good for several weeks, and go away to go read a book or read the Bible, get discipleship, ask questions, right? So this is not a man who lacks for time or resources to go and learn. So the real risk is someone like that, maybe perhaps even against their own knowledge, will come into a position of authority. Russell Brand has 11 million followers on X alone, one platform, 11 million. If you take all the major Christian influencers that you and I probably know and add them all up together, we might get to like a million, right? Or maybe we'll get to 2, right? And then you multiply it by 3, 5, 10 even, and you get to Russell Brand. So that's one guy. So he comes in and starts talking about being a Christian for several months, which he's been doing since, I think it's been August, something like that. He got baptized, just casually by some friends. And okay, fine.
As you do,
As you do. Well, look, I was baptized by friends. They were members of the church, lifelong believers. They'd set up the ministry at Burning Man. So whatever, right? But the first thing that I did was I said,
it could have been done with a squirt gun. Did you see those during COVID when the Catholic priests were baptizing babies with squirt guns? I was like,
no, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's not how you do that. No.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's coming to me now. I do remember. I like that has to be a joke. Sadly, it wasn't. No, but then it's like, what did he do after that? Like, did he go join a church? Did he try to understand this new thing that he'd come to? My first instinct was 3 things. Well, I'm a Christian now, so that means I go to church. It means I pray on my knees, by the bed before I go to bed, because that's what Christians do. And I forgive as I've been forgiven. All the churches were closed when I became a Christian, by the way. Why did I know to do these things? Because that's what Christians do, right? And so, but I didn't stop pursuing, didn't think that I just understood the faith just because I'd gotten baptized. And I think the risk of a Russell Brand is that it doesn't seem to me that he's pursuing really trying to understand any aspects of the historical faith from any tradition. And yet he stands up and says things like he just did yesterday, we need to have a conversation about LGBT because this is a subject that Jesus cares about. Indeed, it is a subject that Jesus cares about. But would you like to know what it is that Jesus said about this particular topic? Because we have it written here, but I don't think that's the case, right? And even setting aside someone like Russell Brand to come in, a celebrity's like, I'm a Christian and I think abortion is cool. And that I'm a Christian because I've been saying it for a couple of years. And a lot of people are like, well, they said they're a Christian, and I don't know what these other crazy fundamentalists are on about. And so I'm grateful that you spotted it as well. This risk that the only way to subvert the church from the inside, I mean, it's already been so heavily infected by various New Age doctrines. And, if you want to kick over a hive,
Schofield Bible.
Yeah. Schofield Bible, yoga, the Enneagram, like, come on, right? So that's already in there. And so I think the stage has been set for people to come in and make big professions of faith that a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, they're saved. Like, okay, I'm going to listen to you, and I'm not going to listen to my pastor or my priest or that stodgy old Bible that I got hanging out over there.
I think the number one thing we got to be very careful, be very mindful of, and fight against whenever we start seeing it is that sort of creep of Gnosticism, as a nice little, or even Hermetics, is that smuggling in of this desire that you think that prayer is magical. If you pray to God the right way, you get $1 million, or you'll be, your movie will get made, or whatever have you, right?
Right.
And that sort of Gnostic tendency towards the one, right? Reduce everything down to the one. We're a Trinitarian religion at the core of it. Yeah. And the Trinity breaks both the dialectics and gets rid of this whole sense of oneness. There's oneness of God. We're brought together within the church. We're made whole in the church. There's language there that I think people can easily get deceived by. But this idea that we all came from one being, and this planet is a prison that we're trying to we're trying to escape from. Even just for the homosexual kind of conversation, it's that there's room to understand it, that the thing that we're at war with is the passions. So the passions of lust, for example, that's the seed of sin, right? That's where this will be produced from. And we can look for that passion of lust, heterosexuals, homosexuals, whoever has it. Now, within homosexuality, that's all lust. it's all lust, it's all pride, it's all mirroring oneself, it's love of oneself, it's self-love to the that's carried out to another individual of oneself. So that's despite all the other concerns about the practice, that's what we have to be looking for and warring against. That's common for heterosexuals and homosexuals and everyone else alike. But that's the conversation that no one really wants to have, because everyone wants to have their lust and eat it too, right? They want their passions. They don't want to give up their pride. They don't really want to confront their vainglory. They don't really want to get challenged on any fundamental level. They just want to be forgiven, and they want to find some passage they can go, well, look, right? Jesus would forgive them. It's like, yes, but you have to return, repent, and work towards redemption. The repent thing is really important. It's supposed to change you. You're supposed to be a different person, than you were before. Like, it's a big catalyst. It's a big one. And if you don't have that, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You're just going to keep producing the same awful results, and then try to convince everyone else that it's perfectly fine. It's like, it's not fine. And look, you're not affecting my life directly, or maybe in sort of auxiliary ways, but I just feel it's more like I just feel real sad for you. I feel really, really sad for those people, because they've been given this suffering, and their suffering is obvious. Some of us don't know our suffering yet, and sometimes you're going to find your suffering down the road, but other people have been given that suffering for pretty obviously, and it's something that they can confront and deal with. But if the rest of society and everyone else, and even the church, begins to condone it and doesn't allow them to confront it, doesn't allow them to have true repentance, so they can be redeemed through Christ, and understand that this their condition is a condition of suffering, but there's still hope. There's still love. There's still things you can still life there. I think you just open up the doorways for nihilism again. Like, and how is that a Christian message? How is that good? Who is that serving? No one, right? And again, I think it's just, you condone these sins so you don't have to confront your own.
Mm-hmm. Always. I want to take that, and I think that's a great observation about lust being something, a sin that we all struggle with, and bring it back to young men's anger, because I think it's a similar, that you're talking about controlling the passions, and we can be sanctified of lust, and we can be sanctified of anger as well. And I think that that's such an important message, to have to learn how to rejoice in all circumstances. And that is the New Testament. Job provides a great example. Job is, the entire book is everyone accusing him, his own friends accusing him, until finally, after he's lost way more than many young men today have lost, he finally breaks at the end, and then God puts him in his place and lifts him up, and then redeems him. But the idea that we allow our anger to sanctify us, to make us holy, not to turn it into a weapon that we wield against ourselves, which I think causes depression, or to wield it against other people, which causes damage in our relationships, or to wield it against the world, which is what we're talking about. Like, yes, how do we acknowledge for young men, your anger? Look, your anger is legitimate, right? I think in many ways, I understand the feeling, I understand the impulse, and I'm not telling you that you're wrong to feel that way. However, the desire to take the anger and then do damage and destruction with it, that is something that you need to be sanctified of. And on the other side of that process, on the other side of submitting to God's sovereignty in the circumstances of your life, that's where you find true peace, true freedom, the peace that surpasses understanding. And that is the Christian message. That is the Christian. Please go ahead.
Father Turbo Qualls once said something on Buck Johnson's show, Counterflow, which I urge any of your listeners and perhaps you to check out. And again, I'm not trying to drag people towards orthodoxy. These are things that have hit me and have helped me. So Father Turbo said that that depression is actually a form of vainglory, because really what you're sad about is things not working out the way that you want them to. like you wanted something and God isn't delivering and something's not happening the way you want it. So now you're sad, which is just a different reaction to getting angry about it. So
Hmm.
this desire for vengeance and this even anger itself is rooted in self-love, in pride, vainglory, which let's say vainglory is the external presentation of pride, and pride is internal. So when we wrestle with our pride and we begin to practice and try to get humble in every way, you automatically begin to decrease your anger, because really what you're angry about is things didn't work out the way you wanted them to.
Hmm.
I want more. I'm deserving more. I'm so good. Why don't I have my house or this or that or the $1 million or the big contract? I need these things. I should have these things. And I'm angry that I don't have them. They didn't work out. And I was lied to. I was this. I was like, yes, you were. But you believed the lie because you wanted the thing. And you believed the lie because the lie exalts you. Didn't the lie tell you how great you were or how great you would be if you had that piece of paper or you did the thing, whatever? So when we address our pride, we return, we repent, redeem, the just to return. So again, that story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son is brought low and is about to eat the food of the pigs. He's been humiliated. He's been brought low. And in that moment, there's a moment of humility, saying, I will return to my father, who I've turned my back on, and ask for his forgiveness in hopes that he'll take me back and at least make me work his fields, with no desire to be anything else but that. And when we return to the Father, he embraces with love, exalts us.
Hmm.
Return, repent, redeem. Return, repent, redeem. And when I say redeem, it doesn't mean that we will be redeemed automatically. It's again, it's a performative action, right? It's a cycle every day, right? Every day we're returning and we're repenting. Wake up in the morning, you say your morning prayers. There you go. You're returning, right? You're repenting of your future sins. Even you're basically saying, Lord, I know I'm going to screw up, but please have mercy on me. I'm a sinner, and hopes that every day you get a little bit better, and you confront a bit more, and you find a bit more humility, and you address that pride, you address that vainglory, and all the other things that are attached to it. I think especially anger and sadness are really attached to that sense of, and I'm not talking about mourning and let's say,
Yeah, different.
even anger. I think anger can be a great alarm. Sometimes you're damn right. You should get angry about something, but also realize that oftentimes what we're getting angry about is this sense of slight.
Hmm.
And again, it comes down to who do you think you are? Why do you think you're deserved of anything? Our Lord, God Himself, comes down for us, is whipped, scorned, deceived, betrayed, spit upon, everything. Go back, I urge people, I just rewatched The Passion of the Christ for the first time in like, whatever, 10, 15 years. And that segment of Christ, being walking to Calvary. And it hits you different sometimes, I think, especially around this time of year. And realize that, like, every time you're getting angry because someone said something mean about you online, there's your model. So what are you upset about?
Yeah.
What's your slight? What have you been through? Really? What are you suffering? Really?
Yeah.
And you think of what the suffering of his mother, having to stand there and watch, and she knew his entire life what was going to happen, and yet she had to let it happen because she was called to a higher purpose. That kind of suffering for both men and women. There's your models.
Yeah.
And I think that gives you, again, that context of whenever you are feeling slighted. And I'm not saying, yeah, I can't speak to everyone. I don't know what's going on in your life. I'll say these things. You're like, no, I'm justified and stuff. I'm like, sure, you'll talk to your priest. Who am I? But I would also, I know what's worked in my life is every time now I feel that I'm like, yeah, okay, calm down there, buddy. Like, you know, you're not so high and mighty. You're not so great. So maybe calm down a little bit and take it a bit, you know. And again, it doesn't mean to let everyone walk all over you. I think that's this passive Christian model that is, I think, has been too popularized as well.
Yeah.
But again, there's that discernment, and for many of us, because we lack those good models, it's going back to the church, finding a good church father, finding a good priest, finding good mentorship, and building that discernment up for ourselves and passing that down to our kids.
Okay, so I want to play the counter advocate, not the devil's
Sure.
advocate, but the counter advocate here, and say, okay, so here are two Gen X guys. They're sitting here talking about this, and we just don't understand because Gen X is just one step really removed from Boomers. You don't understand me as a whatever young Generation Z man. You don't understand my situation. You're 20 plus years removed from me. Men have been slighted and et cetera, et cetera. Like you just don't get it, old man. Because that is part of the spirit, right? That is part of the spirit, not just to disappear to within its own sphere of self-pity and to emerge with righteous indignation over its lot in life at the most comfortable time in human history, but it's also a rebellion from anyone who's older in a position of authority who disagrees. They'll agree with men that are older. They'll like if an older man, same place of us, say Gen X man, says, "You know what, young man, you're right." It's like, yeah, I like that guy. But if a older, wiser man, says, of the same age, not even wiser, a different guy says, "Hey, you have something there that you need to be sanctified of." Oh, you just don't understand. So what's the response to that? Because there is a hatred going up the generational
Oh,
chain.
hey man, we're our generation is part of the problem. What are you talking about? Like, I'm part of the problem. I modeled all the worst behaviors for you kids. Atheist, iconoclast, fornicator, all the things, all the fun stuff. Did all that stuff. And now I'm pulling that ladder up behind me, aren't I? Right? Oh no, not for you. Oh, those things are bad, right? Get yourself to church, young one. Don't just avoid all that fun stuff. So
Right.
I get it. Here, so again, let's get back to that redemption, because everyone wants to blame the boomers, right? Everyone likes blaming the boomers, and once the boomers are gone, they're going to blame us, or they're going to blame the next person, or whatever have you. And again, with possibly very good reasons.
Well,
The
Gen
the
Z,
thi-
they are the kids of Generation X, are they not? They're like the youngest kids of Boomers and the oldest kids of Generation X.
yeah, I guess, yeah, something like that. I think
Yeah.
because it's a millennial Gen X kind of mixing. Yeah, Zoomers would probably be, again, another quote from my buddy Charles Spidil was that the this revolution we're going to start seeing is a Gen X head on a Gen Z body, and that'll be very interesting to behold. I think we're starting to see that as well. But
Pass.
yeah, yeah, hell hath no score like the hell hath no fury like an iconoclast scorned. But
Uh,
the so
uh,
okay, here's a little personal story. So like I said at the start, my mother and father divorced when I was very young, and I saw my birth father John throughout my life. I stopped talking to him around 22, 21, 22, because we didn't have a relationship there. And I never had any real animosity towards him. That's just the way things are. But in my daughter was born in 2020. We went into basically second lockdowns in Montreal, and I had the hand injury and all that stuff. So I was out of work. I was getting disability pay, and for that first year, and for most of her life since then, but just in that first year, I spent every single waking hour with her for
hmm.
one solid year and plus. And I realized somewhere in that time period that I had spent more time with my daughter, just in terms of hours, right? With my daughter in that one year than my father had spent with me my entire life.
Wow.
And that hit me, that sort of and I realized that I had essentially redeemed my dad, my
Hmm.
my birth father, uh, because without him, I wouldn't be, and without me, my daughter wouldn't be. And in just in that act of giving myself over to my daughter for that year, because of the situation, in my mind, I redeemed my dad, because just by being a better father, by honoring the office of the father and taking it on fully and being very serious about it, and I've hopefully been practicing that ever since. I redeem him. I redeem the idea of him. I redeem the office of the father through me, in my own little way, from myself. So I would say to the Zoomer who has those criticisms, and I think they're just. They have an opportunity here to do the hard thing. The easy thing is to blame and say, I didn't get the things I wanted, and screw those guys. The hard thing is to go, okay, well, how do I do better than them? And that by doing better than them doesn't mean the success part. This is the Andrew Tate problem. This is the materialism thing. How many Bugattis can you have? It's not about success and money and all those other things. And again, maybe easy for me to say, but it isn't that. It's how do you reclaim the idea of man, right? How do you reclaim the office of masculinity and redeem it and make masculinity great again, truly great? How do you make the office of the father, the office of the husband, the office of the son great again? The one thing that we never give up is that, so, I was a son, or I am a son. I then become a husband, and I become a father. So all those categories have a slate of duties and responsibilities, and you try to fulfill them as best you can, or as presented to you. And as you move up through this hierarchy of positioning, let's say, you don't give up the old you carry it forward, and you carry it forward into these new positions. So if you are a really good son, you're going to be much better positioned to being a really good husband, and you would be much better positioned if you're a really good husband to be a very good father. So you kind of want to try to max out in those categories as much as you can, and realize that, especially when you're married, where you're doing the father and the husband thing at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. But you're trying to be good at both, and that's very difficult. And I get it wrong all the time, but it's the attempt, right? It's the earnest attempt, and getting better at it is just getting better at it. And you redeem the office of the husband. The husband even has been hollowed out, has been made a mockery of, has been, maybe that's what the true sin of the boomers is, that these categories of man have been denatured. So redeem them. Be the good father. I dare you. Be better than me. Sure. Because here's a nice thing too, and maybe this is something we can throw the secularists a little bit, is that you live eternally through your children. There are elements of my grandfather, who was my surrogate father, that are alive in me. If you watch the show at all, I make some some quotes from him that are a bit funny, whatever. But there's other things that are from him that are in me, and I know they're from him, that are in me. I know exactly what those parts are, and maybe I'll translate that to my daughter. But either way, she's going to receive it as from me, and so there'll be parts of me living in her, and that goes down the line. So all the good parts get saved, and all the bad parts get whisked away, or therapied out, or whatever. So you want your children to retain the best of you and to carry that forward, because elements of you will survive in them, and they'll survive in their future children, and so on and so on. So in a sense, you live forever. Elements of you get to live forever in your children, but only the best of you will.
Hopefully.
The bad traits will be there too, but the bad traits are not something that they want. They don't want that, right? They want to get rid of that if they can.
You discipline it out of them.
Right.
But you get to see them first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the aim,
I want to put together then a couple of pieces that you said. So I agree with you. To be the husband, father, son that redeems your own husband, your own father, right? So I want to put that together with the concept of the vengeful son, because that's where a lot of these young men are. And I want to put that together with the idea that um, men are romantics masquerading as pragmatists, and women are pragmatists masquerading as romantics. So if women are truly pragmatic, and I believe that there's a lot of truth to that, and you see these vengeful young men that have this unsanctified anger, I think my hope had always been that these young men, they just need a family to invest in. Like you just need a wife and kids to siphon off all of this excess energy that you're projecting into being extremely online, and they'll make sure that you don't have the time to get so wrapped up in that, at least for a while, right? But I think what's happening is the well, two things. One is that you have young women going far more liberal now. That's a pretty thoroughly documented trend. But even setting that aside, I think young women are looking at a lot of these guys who are becoming extremely online and are developing these vengeful tendencies, and they're looking at it, and their pragmatic spirit is looking at the, say, misguided romanticism, the romanticism of revolution in these young men, and they're like, right? And then maybe they're not going as a, okay, you disagree. Okay, great. So let's hear it.
We're on a tipping point in many parts. Let's look at Europe. Europe is in a very, very bad place.
Yeah, it is.
So part of my work has been predicting this bond market collapse that we're about to see, I think, next month.
Oh.
So we're going to see, and it's going to really hit Europe really hard. So the offshore dollar, it's all the economic stuff we've been seeing over the last little bit, the tariffs and all that stuff, that's cover for what I reported on, but many other people have been researching and have been calling out for years now. So this is always going to happen. It was an inevitability. It was a mathematical inevitability. It's just going to happen. When that begins to happen, now let's just look at the UK. Well, you've imported all these people. There's great animosity. There's violence in the streets, right? The Vengeful Son's right there. You can say that's an animating spirit for a lot of these immigrants who come over with a chip on their shoulder about Westerners, and they're carrying out some vengeance. We could go that way, right? Just correct a narrative. Either way, things are really bad, and they're about to get a lot worse. Here's a speculation. We'll call it that. What if one day you wake up, let's say you're in the UK, and you wake up and the economy's gone. So all your 401ks, and I'm not joking, all your 401ks, all your retirement funds are gone. Okay? Now, for the average pensioner and stuff, that's horrible. What happens to your security forces? What happens to your policemen? Who, they desert.
Yeah.
Right? Or go, not my problem anymore, not my job.
Right.
Things are get way worse. Now, romantic men, let's say, are called to action. Defend your family, defend your country, defend your culture, defend whatever have you. There's a romantic urge. Pragmatic women are seeing all these problems in society, and they go to their men and they whisper in their ear, fix it. I don't care how you do it. I'm not going to ask questions. Just fix it.
You think so?
Because, oh yeah. Well, how many women now in Europe are reporting being scared to go out in public, unescorted? See lots of those videos, and it's escalating at exponential rates. So when those young women see those angry young men who are primed and ready, and what did I say? 18 and 25-year-old men are nature's WMDs. You give them a reason, and you give them a target, and go fix it. They'll go fix it.
Yeah.
And the only thing holding them back right now is fear of retribution. It's like goats testing a fence. If they find that the electric fence has got a short in it, the one lead goat will get through. And once they get through, everyone follows. So the question is, what happens if and when either the situation gets so dire that people they don't care about the consequences anymore, because the immediate consequences that are facing them on the street are way worse than anything the cops are going to do, right? Or you have a situation where your security forces no longer have a 401, they no longer have a retirement fund, and a lot of them just go peace out.
Children of Men was a documentary.
It doesn't feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so and that is a grim movie to watch in 2025 too. When did it come out? 2012 or something like that?
Someone's saying my volume is very low and muffled. I'm sorry about that. Maybe
You sound fine to me.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, so here was something that I wanted to touch on earlier. So I look at all this and I see this showing up in the Reformed world. There's a big discussion in the Reformed Christian world against, you have this sort of like rising spirit of, we'll call it vengeful son, masculine Christianity,
Sure.
Christian nationalism, and then there's a big contingent of men that are pointing at this and like, hey, these attitudes are unbiblical. These are straight up unbiblical attitudes, and these are things that men need to be sanctified of. The retort comes from the other side. If you look at the state of society right now, particularly in England, that seems to be a flashpoint as well. I think there was something about that this summer. And then men will point back to the Crusades or the times in history where it would seem that that righteous Christian men raised up an army and went at the threat. And that has been there have been a number of historical instances that have been surfaced about that. And so so I listened to your narrative of how things could go down in England, and my thought, as that applies to the United States. Now, I'm in the U.S., you're in Australia, you're Canadian, so what happens in England as part of the Commonwealth has a bit more direct relevance. Not that it isn't relevant to me in the United States, but for us who are stateside, I have felt that Donald Trump and his administration has, up to this point, acted as surprisingly as a pressure release valve. Like, I don't think Donald Trump wants violent revolution, right? I don't think he ever did, and I don't think JD Vance. I don't know so much about Elon Musk, but I mean he's a different sort of figure. I don't think anyone truly on that side, Hegseth, Patel, I don't think they want to see widespread violence in the United States. And I know that that's their concern, and they'd be like, hey, whatever happens in England happens in England. Well, maybe they wouldn't say that. But I wonder, I wonder because this raises the question of, are there forces aligned that want that chaos? Surely there are. Certainly there are those forces in Europe that want level of chaos, and they exist in the United States as well. But I guess my question then would be, is this something that's going to be, I don't know how to phrase it, allowed, pushed back on? Are these things that are going to dissuade Trump? Are they going to dissuade anybody? I'm kind of lost in the question that I'm trying to formulate. It just seems to me it's not as clear cut as it would have been under Biden.
Yeah, I think, from my understanding, the way I'm looking at it is, I think these things are like forces of nature. They're spiritual forces, so they're not something that you really can negotiate with. Now, do I think that certain administrations or people could be more effective than others at directing them and putting them into better places? I'll use better in big, massive air quotes. Sure. Yeah, for a time being. But this is going to be around for at least 60 years, is by my reckoning. So the question really isn't, okay, let's say Donald Trump is really good at deflecting it, and let's say JD Vance is also really good. Well, eventually this is going to age out, and it's going to, again, materialize and metastasize in interesting places. Just like, let's say at the start of the 60s, we have civil rights and this movement towards civil rights. Well, and of course we have violence and upheavals during that period of time as well. But the way it's sold, what originally comes in, the initial volley is miniskirts. And from the miniskirt, you get into women's liberation, the rejection of the patriarchal, more traditional patriarchal structures, and the sort of the inversion of the Divine Mother.
Yeah.
So the idea that, that, again, so we get into sexual revolutions, we get into cultural revolutions, and all that kind of stuff. That's all part of it. That's part of that same overriding spirit. So you wouldn't have been able to tell that from a miniskirt
That's right.
to mothers holding their kids down for inoculations 60 years later. But those two things are connected.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
Yeah,
the
it's
thing.
like,
This is the thing with why I think I'm trying to urge as many people as possible. I don't have any airs on this, is that I don't think that I think a lot of people are going to get sucked into it, and it's going to affect everyone anyways. So it's here, and you're just going to have to deal with it on whatever level. But
yeah.
I'll give you an example. So the big push right now is deportations.
Yeah.
Get all these problem immigrants and people out. And look, there's a crisis. I'm not trying to say there isn't a crisis, and that has to be dealt with. And they're dealing with it this way, sure, right? Then you'll have the big question of how do you keep them out? And also now you're entering into a rivalry with the cartels in the southern border.
Yeah.
Not to mention some cartels in the northern border as well.
So
now you're head-on collision with a confrontation. And I think part of Trump's promises was to build an iron dome across America, built in America, or an iron
against
dome.
Canada.
Yeah. But why would you do that? Why would you need an iron dome across America unless you're afraid or concerned about people invading? Right. So conversations like that are circulating around, let's say, digital IDs, and this has been floated by Tony Blair and many others. And now it's even in America. There's this project called WorldCoin, which is partly funded by Bill Ackman and a few other people. And anyways, look into it. Basically, it's a digital ID system that scans your eyeball. It's a orb, and it scans your eyeball, and that verifies your digital ID. And then with your digital ID, you can use all your no more passwords and stuff, right? Right. Well, that's, again, how are you going to keep people out? We saw them floating this in Florida during the long flu, where DeSantis was floating the idea of digital IDs for immigrants, digital visas for immigrant workers. So this stuff is already here, and that's, again, crisis response, right? Yeah. So the more we lean into that sort of spirit of vengeance, sure, it might be, again, because there's a legitimate crisis, something that has to be dealt with, something that, you're right, this is a problem, but because we're going to approach it in a much more violent, aggressive, very teenage kind of teenage male kind of energy, the desire now is to break it. Well, as you break things, there's going to be other responses. Right. And these things beget other things. So I think where I would see this going, the natural tendencies for this would be to become more totalitarian.
Yeah.
And a lot of things we're worried about in terms of liberty, security, all those things, that the people will choose security, and they'll choose it hard. So how do you get chips in people? Well, you deport them and say, yeah, put this chip in you so you can't get back in.
I mean, one of the ways you get chips in people is you create a crisis. And I think the thing that's worried me about the Vengeful Son is that there are so many young men that are taking the bait. And, they've been raised, they're extremely online. They've been deprived, starting in COVID, of meaningful outdoor real life experiences. We live in safety culture, et cetera. And you have this strong, not only do you have pornography, but you have the strong radicalization running. And so you have young men that are sort of being ginned up in a very real way daily, right? And then you have the endless stream of the news cycle, and it just kind of begins spiraling on itself as a way of taking young men and fashioning them into a weapon to launch them at something. And I think the worry about that is that's essentially isn't that what feminism has been warning about for centuries, right? Centuries, not centuries, decades, right? That's like, we fear this aspect of men, and now we're seeing these men right? And I think that there is a component of women that will say, okay, go fix it. But I think there's also a component of women separately, perhaps of a more devouring mother mindset of any generation, that will say that is exactly the behavior that we said that men were about, and this is why we need, totalitarianism, almost as an excuse.
I feel like they're going to get drowned out. I think the thing that the other interesting little trick I think is going to get played is that the a lot of the people who are imbued by the spirit, who are leaning fully into the spirit, will be the ones who set up the security states.
Oh, okay.
Order. It'll be order, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay,
sort
I've
of
seen
that
this
burning
too.
desire, right? To
Yep.
tear down the old order, enact a new one, build a new one. Because again, who are the heads of these things? Let's look at the technocrats for a second.
Yeah.
Well, these aren't disorderly people. The whole VC mindset, super order. What do these guys always sell these courses on? Drink your water with Himalayan sea salt and structure your day and all that. Boop, boop, boop. Order, 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 order.
The Brian Johnsons of the world.
Yeah.
I'm going to live forever, right? Yeah.
Right. But that's very ordered. They're just angry. They're angry at. I'll tell you where the seeds are. This again, going back to Peter Thiel. You read 0 to 1. He spends at least a chapter or two talking about the 90s and talking about specifically about the dot-com bubble burst. And a lot of people have this myth that the 90s was great and amazing and stuff like that. And to some extent, it was true. There's a lot of euphemism there because of the end of Cold War and the end of history and all these things. But for a lot of Gen X guys this was their coming out period. This is when they should have surpassed their dads, right? Yeah, they had the dot-com systems, and we're making tons of money, and that was going to be the next big thing, and it burst, and they all lost. A lot of them lost everything. That was me. Rebuild, right?
I was in the middle of that at Stanford University in the Bay Area. This was
right, and that held back the majority of Gen X.
Yeah,
and the other part, the blue collar guys like me, saw our jobs. All those good factory jobs and all those other, they all got deported. Yeah. So
in Mexico, Pakistan, China, middle class in America doesn't have jobs because India and Pakistan and Mexico, middle class jobs. They don't have the middle class because those are middle class now.
Right. Yeah. And these are guys who were doing everything they were told to do.
That's right.
Or they're iconoclastic, so we're already at odds with the system, anyways. Because we're a lot of us are the generation of divorced families, of latchkey kids, all the rest of it raised by our grandparents or raised in different kind of scenarios. So we're so right, and we're full on in school, and we're starting to get the idea that the school stuff is crap anyways, and what are they trying to sell us on? And there's a general awareness, I think, in Gen X more than millennials, that this is BS. And so you already have an iconoclastic, resentful, angry generation who got denied, and many of us kind of squeaked through and did all right because we just had a bit of a tailwind, right? But those are the guys who are in charge right now. It's a Gen X leadership, essentially. The brains are Gen X. That's why it's a Gen X head on a Gen Z body.
Oh, I see.
That's what's coming down the pike. So you got a lot of angry, resentful, bitter, nihilistic, 45, 55-year-olds who are informing and kind of directing a bunch of resentful, angry, autistic, but, spurgy 20, 25, 30-year-olds who are just coming into the fruits of their life right now. It's an interesting time. So I think there's going to be a lot of tear it down to rebuild it. Rebuild it into what? That speculation.
I've actually seen a surprising amount of celebration of China. Pardon my sinuses. I'm still getting over being sick, but I've seen a surprising amount of celebration of the monoethnic communist China, command and control society, very orderly, no wokeness, no liberalism, It's like, get on a plane, go check it out. Is that that is not the civilization you want to live in, because that is not how it actually is on the inside. But
Singapore, right?
What's that? Singapore,
Or
exactly.
Singapore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Singapore is so much smaller in scale, right? So it's impossible to understand, how a nation like that could scale to the size of the United States. That's another thing that Americans don't understand very well, especially on the left. They would look at, like, why are we not more like, I don't know, Belgium? Why are we not more like Norway? It's like, that's the size of one city, right? Right. When you scale that up to 300 million people across a landmass of the United States, right, with a nation that's responsible for worldwide, geosecurity, you get a different sort of thing. So
Right.
to say that we should be like Singapore is the right-wing version of that, I suppose. But I that's a very interesting piece about the order being of such importance.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, the adversary doesn't care how they get you, and I think for a large part, the elite structures. I think there's again, when you look into things like digital IDs, we never had the conversation. Should we? There's
Right.
never been a conversation. It's
The
only
Bitcoin guys have.
Well, I don't even think that. I think it was like, we're going to now. Which one? Are we going to do it with chips? Are we going to do it biometric data? You're going to scan your eyeball. You're going to put the thing in your head. Whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll have different models and see which one takes off. But we never had the other conversation. I don't think we're going to have a lot of the transhumanist conversations. We're not going to get the conversation about, should we do genetic tampering?
Oh yeah, no.
Right, the dire wolf thing on the magazine cover recently.
Right.
It's not should we. It's like, well, we've done it. Now what else can we do?
There's no ethic to say we shouldn't. Why shouldn't we?
Of course.
There's no God. Right. Exactly. Bingo. There's no God to object. Yeah, exactly. We're all just clumps of cells. There's no God to tell us what to do. So if the God does, what is it? God, is it Dostoevsky? If God is not real, everything is permitted. Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the attitude.
And this is the danger, right? Because we lack these societal, traditional societal breaks. Like in a traditional society, you and I at our age would be like, mini elders. We'd be like hanging out at church and taking in, directing people to the right sources and hearing the complaints of the younger men and trying to give them advice and direction. But you try doing that now, and then you get called a boomer, and and off they go, right? So we do our best, maybe at this late stage in life, but we're not indicative of the entire culture. So again, I always say this too with the discernment between justice and vengeance. Even if you could use vengeance correctly, let's say I give you this instance and go, we're all going to turn away, and you're just going to use it, use it the way you want to, and maybe you can use it really judiciously. Maybe when to stop. Good for you. Right. But that doesn't mean your neighbor does, or the guy across the street, or the guy in the next state, or whatever, or the guy in a different country who's only seeing that action, and they're going to model that because they want that, because it's going to feel good. And when the more it feels good, the more they're going to want more of it. And the more they can code it as justice, as a good thing, and the moral upstanding thing, because they're going to just invent morals now. We've been bereft of them for so long that now people are just going to start creating them. It'll be whole courses, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, it's good. It's good to get back to universals. It's good to have these conversations again. It's, I think, good for society to start to embrace natural law and order. Unfortunately, these subjects have to be taken very carefully and can't just be, what did my priest say recently? Is like, you don't get sucked into DIY orthodoxy, because you need structure. You need the proper mentorship. You need to, again, get humble and go, I don't know what I'm doing, and I need to talk to people who do. And I think that a lot of people are going to get sucked into that idea of like, well, we're just going to tear it down and we'll rebuild it somehow magically. Like, it doesn't matter. And it's like, no, it matters. You should have a plan for this. And if you don't, you're tearing things down for the wrong people. Because I think a lot of people behind them are going, yeah, sure, tear it down. Yeah, go, tear it down.
Yeah,
Don't worry,
I agree.
we have this whole thing set up. Again, I urge people to go check out what Matthew Erickson was did all his deep dives into PayPal Mafia, which is Peter Thiel, that whole PayPal grouping, and some of those guys who later on went on, and some of their satellite people, they're heavily invested in, let's say, technology that would enable people to be kept out. It was just an announcement. I haven't read the full piece, but Palantir now is helping ICE with facial recognition and all these other kind of technologies that allow them to tell people from people, to help them round them up and get them out of the country. And everyone goes, yeah, there's your solution. And I'm not saying that you should be all for open borders. I say these things and people go, "What are you saying?" I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying, like, the solution that's going to be presented for you isn't coming from you. You're not having the conversation of how do we do this. It's more like, it's getting done. This is how it's going to get done. And isn't it great? Problem solved.
Look at all the great beams.
Until you become the problem.
So you said something a minute ago that I think was really interesting, that it seems, and I've struggled to put words to this, we'll see if we can land the plane, is that it seems that whatever is happening is outside of my ability to influence. Not that it's all on me, and I don't mean to suggest that, but the feeling of like, I could stand at the beach and I can shout at the ocean, but it's not going to do anything. And I've begun to develop this feeling that whatever I may see, whatever problems I may identify, whatever medicating function, soothing function, de-escalating function I may want to serve, is not working. And so that's been very interesting to me, to encounter, I think you called it a spiritual force or a force of nature that's living within people that is outside of my ability to influence. Again, not that I'm the only guy influencing it, but sometimes you get the sense that, okay, this is a situation that I feel like I can have some influence on. I have a meaningfully sized platform. Maybe I can make some difference. I've since discovered that does not appear to be the case. And I've encountered that other times in my life, sailing, mountain climbing, where it's like, hey, that storm up there, there's nothing I can do about it, right? Just going to have to ride it out. So I guess the question then would be, for anyone listening that does not wish to be a part of it, what can they do? And that has a two-part sort of answer, which is, what should they do within their own lives, within the sphere of what they can control? And then the second question is there anything that can be done towards something that you're talking, and I don't think wrongly, you're talking like it's an inevitability. It very well may be, but is there anything to do to stave off this inevitability? You spoke that this is something that we're going to be dealing with for 60 years. And that kind of struck me because, like many Americans, I live in a next election cycle kind of mindset. It's not a right way of thinking for sure. But the thought that this simmering, bubbling anger that is just kind of there, the vengeful son spirit in the tyrannical father was, I don't know how long, call it 40 years, 1920 to 19. Yeah. And then 60 years of the devouring mother. And so if we're at the beginning of the vengeful son, if it all holds true, then we could be in for many decades of this. And whoa. Now, I don't think that'll necessarily be the case. It might not, particularly because the vengeful son has a way of expelling his energy all at once in one big go, and then falling flat. Let's say he's a teenager. But in that moment the full intensity is there. So maybe I'm feeling this looming sense, as I think many people are. There's this looming sense that something is coming. Maybe it's coming, maybe it's not. Maybe it's the apocalypse. Maybe it's the end times. Maybe it's the next grand psyop, or maybe that it's just the constant teasing of the thing that's keeping us just on the edge, like, just do the thing already, which I think is probably most likely, that living in the not knowing creates far more anxiety than the actual release of the tension. But given all these different things, what sort of things can we do in our lives, and what sort of things can we do in the collective?
So Saint Seraphim of Sarov once said that a peaceful heart saves 1,000 souls. And the
Amen.
idea, again, this idea of memetics. So you as a model will affect everyone around you. And as you affect them, they affect other people. So it's ripples, right? And again, you can place yourself in one piece of that node, but in a community, there are many nodes. So the work ahead of us is this, the way I see it. And I think this is actually harder for old men like us, because we get to a point and we get sort of self-assured and have certain confidences because you have to, and you start to think you got this sort of figured out. And the first thing you have to realize is that you're wrong. You have been wrong, and you are wrong.
What?
You don't know. Yeah, I know, right?
How dare you, sir?
You know,
come on my show.
Speaking truth to me. What is this indignity? Yeah, I know. I have to say it to myself.
I'd like
all
to
the
speak to the management.
Well, there's a way to do that. So once you get to that point of humility and going, okay, I'm wrong, right? I'm wrong. I've been wrong. I am wrong. I'm much more likely to get this wrong than right, because my basis of reality, my basis of my understanding of all these things is at best incomplete. So that's the first step, is to give yourself a bit of an out on that, by simply saying, like, okay, if I'm wrong, then it gives me the opportunity, instead of getting depressed about it, it gives me the opportunity to learn. And no matter how old I am, I can start to set things right. Now, I may not be able to do everything, but I can start to, as Peterson thing, clean my room, right? Clean your spiritual room in whatever way you can. And I think that this, again, this social media stuff, I'd like to have it on the show maybe in the future, Will, and we can talk about this directly, because it's something that plays on my mind. Is when you start doing these things and you start building a platform and you start doing these shows, it's easy to get dragged into that vainglory. And it's hard to balance that sense of duty and humility with pride and vainglory, because you get, well, the numbers go up. Oh, people are listening. Oh, okay, get compliments.
Look at the comments.
Yeah,
Followers.
Yeah, and it's very tempting, and that's the thing you gotta deal with. And just keep reminding yourself that it's that, again, that return, repent, redeem. Right? Get humble. Stay grateful. I think it's incredibly difficult in this world, but you also, so in terms of effect, I think we all want some big effect. Like we judge Russell Brand, but kind of want what he has, right? Wouldn't it be, if I was Russell Brand? Oh, if I was Russell Brand, I would not be in tidy whities dunking people in the water. No, sir. I would bring the true ministry out to the people. And I would really direct people to the right thing. Oh, would you? So
I don't want what he has. I want him to be him and have what he has and be better at what he's doing. Like, Russell, put some pants on. Keep doing it. Put some pants on.
Stop crying on stage. No, I'm saying you. I'm talking directly to you, or even to myself. It's like, I think we see that effect and we say, part of I'll speak personally. I get dragged with that. Like, I would want that. I would want that reach. And you have to realize that the most important reach I have is with my family, right? Or in your own local community. And I know people say this all the time. But it is true, is that you don't understand the effects you're having on people, both good and bad. The things that are going to remember you for, and the things that you're going to have direct effects on, it's incalculable. You're going to maybe say some throwaway line, and that's the thing that's going to, really be a positive thing for someone. So I think it's just giving the attention towards and keeping yourself properly humble, which is, again, very difficult in this age of of reach and influence. And then so I think that answered part of your question. What were the other part of your
So that
question there?
so that was the what can we do in our own lives, and I think that's kind of both. Actually, it's kind of it's an exceptional answer because it answers both at the same time. What can we do in our own lives? Focus on our own righteousness, our own purity, our own sanctification, and I love how you take the mimetic theory that's being used against us, which is a universal principle. Let's say, and you turn it against the other way. It's like, okay,
Right.
if we're being driven by our mimetic desire to imitate these models, pick them, well, we don't actually have to do that. We can be the sources of mimetic imitation ourselves.
Yeah, and realize that you are anyways. That people are going to look to you, especially as you rise in the hierarchy of, let's say, attention, whether it's in your online or your family or community or some of that. The higher up the hierarchy you go, the more people are going to be drawn to you. So you'll be the model for more than just your kids. You'll be the model for many different people. Many people will attach ideas of what, let's say, father is to you. If you're a successful father, people will see that, and it doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. It just means the fulfillment of. So I think that that's where we could end that on, is that try to fulfill the office that you're given at any given time. If you're not married and you don't have kids, fulfill the office of the son or the daughter of the child, and be the good kid, right? Even if you're 45 years old, be the good child. And what is that? When we can run down what are those duties? What are what must you fulfill, and carry that forward. I always said, if you want to do little tiny changes in your environment, just go out and pick up garbage. Don't allow your environment to be dirty. And again, that just transfers over to people, because a story from my grandfather. So he used to race pigeons back in the day. He had to give that up. He had a rooftop, roost and stuff like that. But he still, he beat him every time. Racing homing pigeons. But he still always said like to feed birds, and I guess now the standard thing is don't feed them bread. But my grandfather would go around to we had a school in the back of us, and he'd go around and he'd go through garbages and get all the kids would throw away their sandwiches and stuff like that. So he'd take them all and get some loaves of bread as well, and bring them down to his workshop in the basement. And he had this big giant sort of cutting blade on a slab of wood, and he would sit there and very methodically cut all this bread up into little tiny cubes so he could go feed the birds with. Right. And it's not, and I don't go and do the exact same thing, but I remember that that sticks with me. That is ingrained in me. Like, do things like that sort of purposeful doing of a thing, a very small thing, to feed birds. Like, what is that? So there's that stuck in me, and he wouldn't have known that was going to influence my life or my thinking, what 40 odd years down the road, but there it is. So you don't know what's going to stick with people, and you want the best of it to stick with people. So be mindful, and again, get humble, be grateful, win awards.
Those are fantastic answers. Thank you very much for that. And I think that's actionable, and I think godly and biblical, and all these good things that can give people something genuinely to aspire to that is also non-reactionary, right? It's not like, okay, out of the reaction to this meme become the other meme. Like, no, like you follow the path of Christ, and that will keep you safe. And you don't do it in a reactionary sense as well. You do it in a sense of obedience. And I think that's the right way to go. Wonderful. Well, sir, this has been a delightful conversation. I'm so grateful that we connected over the Vengeful Son, and we're able to go off-roading into so many different philosophical, theological, spiritual, political topics. This has been excellent. Where would you like to send people to find out more about you and what you do?
Good question. Right now, I've been in YouTube sin bin for some reason. I don't know why. I think I've been in conversations with them, so my visibility has been down. You should be able to still find me if you search for me. I've been checking on that. But Mironchuck Now is the name of the channel. My name, Mironchuck Now. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Substack. iTunes, all the podcatchers, and over on X as well, where I post regularly. So yeah, multiple shows out there. Right now, I'm doing Then and Now with Jim Jotras. So we do a weekly show where we talk about geopolitics, a lot of Orthodox Christianity there as well, and conversations mostly around Ukraine, Russia, but other places as well. So that's a weekly show every Tuesday. We stream live around 10 p.m. Eastern. I have an interview show that I'm putting on a slight hiatus so I can get to some other stuff as well. But that's Then and Now. There's at the end of the day, there's a slew of those out there for people to go check out. I had a series called Friend or Fed, which is more of a panel show that'll be coming back hopefully pretty soon.
What a great title!
In a brand new format. Yeah, it's a fun one. You should check those out. And what else? And then I do live streams and talks, and I show up on other people's shows like Will's. Thanks so much, Will. I appreciate it. And I'll be doing a new project with my friend Matt Erickson over on King Build. So keep my ears and eyes open for that. And yeah, that's me. If you search for nice thing about having that name is not a lot of us out there. So
that's right.
If you look for Mironchuck, you'll probably find me somewhere down there.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to send everyone that way. Many of those links are in the show notes. And thank you again so much for your time tonight, Jason.
Thank you so much, Will. Appreciate you, man.